Lesson number 57 and first lesson for this new series. We are learning JavaScript and we are learning JavaScript by examples. In this series, we will create this application called How Many Tigers, and it has a question, an image area, a number of options as a number of radio buttons and a number of options. If you select the correct answer, you will have a tick or a cross as a response, and then you have a different set of images. If you select the correct answer again, you'll have the tick, but if you do select the incorrect answer, you'll have a cross. So I will change the size of my browser, and we have a folder called How Many Tigers. If I double click on it, this is the final version of the application, and it also have another folder called images. If I double click on it, we have a set of 10 images here. If I double click on this one, for example, we have 3 tigers. If I select this image, we have 1 tiger. If I select this image, we have 10 tigers. So we will be using these images for our project. I will close everything and I will leave this open. We'll close this folder, and then I will drag and drop this folder on the Visual Studio Code, which is my text editor. And we have this folder open. So I'm gonna close this image folder and I will click on this area, and I will create a new file and I will call it How Many Tigers, lesson number 51 and first lesson of the series .html. Don't forget to type the HTML extension. And if I change this, we have a blank document. If I minimize this and open this folder again, we have the new HTML document that we have just created, which is blank at the moment. So in the text editor, I will type in the exclamation mark and I will press tab. We have a basic HTML skeleton in front of us, and within the body area, I want to create a div with the help of hash symbol. I will type in first and press tab. We have just created a div that has an ID of first, and the inner HTML of this div is empty. So if I save it, nothing is gonna be visible. If I type in something within the inner HTML of this div, that inner HTML should become visible. But we want to leave this empty, as we want to use JavaScript to populate the inner HTML of this div. So this is blank at the moment. Within the body area, I will create an opening script tag and a closing script tag, so the browser knows that this should be within this body, not after the body. And I will create a variable called questions, and within this variable I will save an array just by typing an opening square bracket and a closing square bracket. So we have just created an array which is being saved in this variable. It is empty at the moment, but we want to create an object within this array at 0 index. So if I type in an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket, I have just created an object within this array which is also empty at the moment. So within this object, I want to say question. I am creating a key and a value pair, and the first key is question and double quotation, and the question will say how many tigers. and a question mark. So now I can populate this question with the help of JavaScript within this inner HTML of this div. Just below the array, I can say document dot get element by ID. So I'm using this built-in method that can target an element with the help of ID, and in this example we will be targeting this element with the help of this ID here. So a pair of parentheses, and then the ID of this element is first, and the inner HTML of this div, we want it to be populated by this question. So we will use this variable questions and then at index 0. So this object is located at index 0 of this array, and at question 0 we want to target this question here, semicolon, a typo, HTML. So if I now save it and refresh it, we have this question in front of us. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do, I also want to create an image element, and if so it is blank at the moment, nothing, the source is blank. So we can actually pull this image with the plain HTML. So we can target this folder images, and within this images folder we can say one tiger.svg. So if I now save it and refresh my web browser, we have an image. But again, we do not want to use this. We want to use JavaScript, as we do not want the image to be there statically. We want to be able to change images with the help of JavaScript. If I do that, it would probably not be easy for me to change the images. So I'll remove everything, but I will give it an ID, and I will call it vimage. So if I now save it, we have an image element that has an ID, but there is no source attribute. So if I refresh it, we don't have the image anymore. But we can create another key here, key and value pair. I will call it image and colon and quotation marks, images folder, and the name of the image is one tiger svg that we want to pull. We can again use this method document dot get element by ID, and the ID of this element is vimage. So within quotations, single or double quotations, we will say image vimage, which is the ID, and then source of this image should be again this variable questions 0 index, and the key is dot image. So that is gonna be the source of the image for this element. So if I now save it and refresh my browser, we have an image of the tiger that is being picked up, that is being populated with the help of JavaScript method document.getElement by ID, and the source attribute is being provided with the help of JavaScript. So we also want to provide some options, and for that options, rather than creating the elements here, we want an input element. We want again to use JavaScript to create an input element. So I will create another variable and I will call it vinput, which is equal to document dot create element. I'm using another method, and the element that we want to create is an input field. So we have created this input element, but that input element, unlike these two elements, is not attached to the body by default. If it is created with the help of JavaScript. So I will say document dot body dot append child, and the element that we want to append as a child of the body is this element. So we input. So if I now save it and refresh my browser, we have an input element, and you can type in anything here, but we want this input element to be a radio button. So we can say we input dot set attribute. We want to change the attribute of this input element, and the attribute that we want to change is type, and then we want this input element to be of type radio. So if I now save it and refresh it, we have a radio button instead of an input that users can type in. We also want to create some options for the users. So if I create an other key and a value pair, options semicolon, and I will create another empty array within this object, and I will say 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So we have created another array within this object, and this array is located in the main array. So we will, in order to show the array these options here, I have to create another element, and I will say let v label. This is the name of the variable, and I will say document dot create element, and the type of the element has to be label. And we have created a label, but again, because we did create it with the help of JavaScript, it is not attached to the body. So we will have to say again document dot body dot append child, and the element that we want to append is v label. Save it, and if I refresh it, nothing happens because we don't have actually any label. So I will say v label dot text content property, and if I just say 1 here and save it and refresh it, we have this label appearing in front of this radio button. But again, we want to use one of these options or all of these options. So I will say questions, which is the name of this variable here, and then at index 0, and we want to use this key options, and within this key I want to use the element at 0 index again. So if I type in 0 and if I save it and if I refresh it, we again have this option 1. If I type in, say for example 3, so 0 1 2 3, we should have 4 here. So if I save it and refresh it, so we are picking up these options from this array. So I'll type in 0 again, but we now want to create 6 copies of these input fields and these labels. So I will enclose this in a loop. So I will create a for loop, and I will say for let I is equal to 0. I want to run this loop 6 times. So I will say if I is less than 6, increase the value of I by 1. So I plus plus, and opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket now will enclose everything within the body of this loop. So if I now save it and refresh it, we have 6 copies of the input element, as well as this option is being presented 6 times, which is not correct. So instead of using this hard-coded value, we can use this I, which is another variable, and the value of I is increasing by 1 every time the loop runs, and the loop will run 6 times. So I can use this I here, and if I now save it and refresh it, we have the different options. So this is it for today, and in the next lesson I will show you how to format these things, in that if I change the size of my browser, you can see that the image is too big and the writings is too small here, and the options are visible and the writing is visible on the left hand side. So we'll format this in the next lesson. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next lesson.